Hello, money queens and listeners. Welcome to Women Behind the Millions. Let's meet the women behind the millionaires, the women supporting, guiding, celebrating women with their wealth. You will hear from women millionaires, how they got there, what they wish they had known, what got them to be a millionaire, the emotional side, the spiritual side, the practical side of wealth. You'll also get to meet the women behind the scenes helping make it happen. Let's dive into Women Behind the Millions. I am Jessica Weaver, your host, best-selling author of 3 books, wealth advisor, and founder of the Women's Wealth Boutique. Let's start meeting the women. Hello, money queens. Hello, listeners. I am Jessica Weaver, and wow, do we have a show for you today. We're actually recording this on International Women's Day, and it's such a timely topic. We are going to be talking about leadership, creating a revolution. Yes, ladies, creating a revolution. And also the communities, the culture, all of that goes hand in hand. So with us today, we are very excited for Maruxa Murphy, who is an award-winning community experience designer, strategist, entrepreneur, author, and catalyst for change. I love that. Who has been transforming communities in person and online since 2000. She leads national and international initiatives with a deep understanding of the dynamics of how people connect and share information. She is further changing the game in community experience design while working in the travel, business, personal development, parenting. Yes, parents are leaders as well, which is a little scary to me, being a mother of 2 young kids. Coaching industries, shifting how communities can be designed from the inside out to transform their industry from the core. So welcome, Maruxa. Thank you so much for being on here, Women Behind the Millions, because you really are. I mean, as women step up into leadership, right, no matter what, the money is going to flow. And I do feel that women need this more than ever, stepping into that leadership, stepping into their power. So thank you so much for being on and sharing your time with us today.
Oh my gosh, Jessica, it's a pleasure to be here. Truly, it is. This is one of my favorite topics. And I love that it's on International Women's Day that we're recording, because the truth is, this is why I rose up for myself, to create revolutionary communities, to create to invite leaders to show up is because I saw some incredible, beautiful women in my own life that had a lot of the characteristics that it takes to be a leader, at the same time didn't have the know-how to really bring that leadership into voice, and from that voice leading them into expansion from both profits as well as lifestyle and opportunity. So it is a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh man, we dive right in. Just there, it's so easy for us to be able to see it in other people and other women, right? They have all the qualities. They just need a little push, a little oomph, a little confidence. What is it? But watching the women who are around you, I want to know, were they feeling very unfulfilled or kind of blocked or kind of toying between 2 different worlds, the world that they're familiar with and like dreaming about what that next level could be if they fully stepped into leadership? And what were they dealing with on an emotional level? Even, I'm sure it dribbled down into finances as well.
Yeah, those are some really good questions. I have to say that, so I grew up in a huge home. My mom is one of 11. My grandmother was very busy being a mother, primarily. We call her mamita. But I saw her find her way through a lot of choices that she made in her own life to shift and break generational patterns of abuse, violence. She left her family in Puerto Rico to move to New York at 19 years old, because her father had been married 5 times and there was so much abuse and so much violence. And so for her brave action was saying hell yes to my life, into her own life. And at 19 made the leap from Puerto Rico to New York.
That must have been terrifying, but as terrifying as that journey, if staying home must have been even more terrifying.
Yeah. Yes, correct. Exactly. And the stories that she would share with us, which only actually showed up in the last 3 years of her life, because she just wanted to hide us from the pain that she went through, really shifted me as a woman to realize, oh my gosh, that's my DNA. And she raised, out of those 11 children, 7 of them are women. So I grew up in a very woman-focused home, watching my aunts, watching my own mother choose to be both and mother and a working parent. But I always found that their struggle was, well, let's just put food on the table, which obviously that's like in, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like the number one, right? It's like safety, like how do we protect ourselves, keep a home, and create that sense of belonging within the home. And so that was my mom, my aunts, my grandmother's story. My dad, on my dad's side, my dad's from Spain, and his mom's mom. So my great grandmother was one of the first women in Spain to ever go to university, college. So yeah. So for me, seeing another brave woman saying hell yes to her life in the time, I obviously we take for granted that we can go to college at this point for many of us, right? I mean, not every family has that luxury, but for overall, it's like, oh, that's something we can aspire to. Being one of the first women, can you imagine the kind of—
There's no example before you.
So choosing to say yes to that, I think about the constant struggle that she must have gone through to break those stereotypes, those generational patterns of, sitting in the kitchen, cooking for the whole family. And she said, no, I want to use my brain in a different way. And what else is possible for me? And so that's kind of the, when I think—
Love those stories.
Yeah, those are the women that have been around me. And watching also at the same time, especially on my mom's side, because that's the side I know more, watching these women make the choice to be brave in the midst of their own cycles of abuse and their own cycles of repression, own cycles of lack of privilege, being multiracial women in the United States. And so really looking at all of those pieces, I think, have made me who I am today, and really recognize and appreciate the life that I get to live today, being here in the U.S.
Those are some strong, empowering women. I love hearing the stories. You're right. We do take for granted just going to colleges now, but being that first one, and I can't even imagine what the bullying she probably dealt with, showing up to class every day, people. So you don't belong here, or even her feeling that she didn't belong here, but sticking with it and going and showing up consistently and breaking that, because we see the patterns of abuse from generation to generation. If one generation is abused, most likely that next generation is. So for them to cut that chain for you, your siblings, children, grandchildren going forward, they might even realize what they were doing, but that was the ripple effect of that decision.
That's right.
Huge. So Maruxa, what has been your journey going into leadership and now teaching others how to step into leadership? What has been kind of your career path, journey, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't know that I was going to step into leadership. I thought leaders had to be CEOs of companies when I was 18 years old, right? I was just being little me. I went to college here in Orlando, Florida at Rollins College, private liberal arts college. And the long and the short of it was, being someone who's multiracial, the first experience I had on the campus was one of, you don't belong here. This is not your school. This is our school. Yeah. And so my gut instinct was like, you don't tell me what to do. And that was
probably now I'm going to find a way.
Yeah. So I found myself in this place, Jessica, where I really was determined to figure out, how do we create a space of belonging here for all people, And how does that, and in that journey, I started to realize, like, oh, I have a voice that really matters. And I can also really inspire others into their own voice, into what really matters for them as well. So the long and the short of it was, I learned that, hey, leaders don't have to look like a certain way. Every one of us is a leader. And from there, I really started developing my own body of work around individuals who wanted to raise up awareness, consciousness, companies that were really positioned to be a little bit different than the rest, When everyone's zigging in their industry, how do we zag? And how do we stand in that profundity, that strength, that courage to be able to lead well in those spaces? So that was my initial journey starting in 1998. Since then, I have led over 200 communities and companies.
200. That's a lot.
100. Yeah. As an advisor, as a mentor to these brands and these companies who are ready to be revolutionary in their space, to really be innovating, to really bring that voice that often isn't heard in the industry and bring that to the forefront of the conversation. That has allowed me to see these companies go from oftentimes vision, just plain vision, or maybe a starter community, like we knew we wanted to gather people, to then generating 6 to 9 figures in revenue in their companies because of how I hold that space and that leadership for them. And I love it. I love it. It feels like play for me to be able to partner and align in with brands who are really doing some incredible good in the world and want to create that expansion in a more transformative way than they often do. So I've had the pleasure now to work with what I call the small but mighty communities of like 250 people, a really small, intimate cohort of humans that then turn that into consistent 6-figure incomes for my clients, all the way through some of my more recent clients, which is a company called Kajabi in the online space, over 60,000 paid members. And so we're working on how do we deepen the relationship with our clients. Another community that I've been currently working on over the last little bit is with a company that has a program called the Erotic Blueprints. It's kind of like the 5 love languages, but for eroticism. And yeah, they were on Netflix's Sex, Love, and Goop recently.
Yes.
Did you see that show? It was such a good show.
I haven't seen that episode, but yes, that is a very good show.
Yeah. So the first two episodes, there are sexologists there that are there, or the creators of the Erotic Blueprints, right? And so they knew that because the show was going to air, it was going to grow. So I was there to support them to go from 100,000 people in their community to over 1 million, and really take them into the process of how the heck do we hold 1 million humans in a community primarily online in their case. So that's the work that I do in a nutshell, and how leadership really plays into that and where I came from.
Now, everybody who's listening knows why we had to have her on, Women Behind the Millions, because we're showing up, we're trying to disrupt and dismantle the financial industry for women. So having you on is such alignment with everything that we're doing and we're pushing forth. You brought up, you said relationships a lot, and it just connected to me how much a leadership is all about relationships. And there's these myths that women aren't good at sales. And we said repeatedly on this show that, well, women are great at relationships and sales is just a relationship. Same thing with leaderships. I think women shy away from really stepping up because we're going to be thought of as being a bitch, too bossy, all these different pieces, or we're scared about too much responsibility, or let's be honest, we're taking care of so much at home. Do we really want to take on more responsibility at work as well? So do you see women shying away from that leadership role? And if so, how do you help women embrace it?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think our society really supports women to stop risking, right? Overall, we're not, the majority of us women are not given this story that it is possible to be both and all. We're just not given that story. Now, when I
given a story that I had to pick, right? My grandmother picked her career. My mom picked the family.
Yes.
So right away as a little girl, I'm like, oh, you can't have both. If you're doing both, you're failing at one. You're consistently failing on one side of the spectrum. So you're right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a big part of it is that we're given that message, right? And so we're ingrained, we're programmed, whereas most men are not programmed that way. Most men are told, yeah, you can be a father and you can be in your business, in your career, and you can do this and you can do that and you can do whatever, right? They're given this freedom just by the story we were told from little children. And so for me, what I imagine is a world where we start shifting that story, where we start reinventing what does it look like to be a woman who is fully aligned in all of who she is. If she wants to be a mom, she wants to be a badass like businesswoman, like hell yeah, she could be both. Why not? Why not? And we get to reinvent those conversations in our own mind. So a lot of times what I find is when I start working with clients who are just getting started in their career, I'm actually meeting with one literally in like an hour, which I'm so excited. She has this really innovative way in which she wants to build out her Airbnb, but she's got those stories, right? Like but I'm only supposed to have this job because my husband's career is like on the forefront. And I think
right. We take the back seat in our careers a lot.
We do. And so what would it look like if you didn't have to feel that way? How could you allow that experience to feel into your body? So I do a lot of, I have a master's in mental health, which I didn't mention before, but I bring in a lot of more experiential strategies to help us feel what we actually are imagining is possible for ourselves. And in doing that, what often comes out is now we start to familiarize with the feeling of being these women that we really want to be and want to become. And we start practicing the embodiment of that feeling to the point where the next thing you know, they're like, yeah, hubby and I had this amazing conversation. We created a new system, a new rhythm, a new routine for us to both thrive. And if we're both thriving, we're both flourishing, what else is possible, right? And so that's typically where I find is that, yes, it's like a yes, this is the way society is. And when a woman is ready, when she's ready to shift her story, that is the time that I can start to see her leadership start to expand in a way that we just haven't yet fully seen, that is ready to come out.
As you're talking about that, stepping into leadership, I was picturing myself, on stage, and it'd be cool for all the listeners, watchers now. Picture yourself leading that conference room meeting with your whole team in your dream office space filled with windows, bright light, whatever it is, or, being on stage, or as you said, having that conversation with the hubs, with your husband, and feeling confident and secure and what you bring to the table, because it is powerful, and that there's going to be a shift in dynamic, right? Your career doesn't have to be the back seat anymore. You can both be equals all over.
Yeah. And it's learning how to really capture who we really are. I mean, this is a little bit more, usually I don't actually share this on podcasts, but I'd love to share this because it's popping through for me. It's like, it's really, I believe that there's something so much more to us than even our programming. There's our soul, there's our beingness, right? And oftentimes we just keep it at this level of like, how much can I do? What does my ego want to tell me to do? It's ego more driven, results oriented stuff that leads our conversations. And to be frank, if we only allow ourselves to be led from that, we find ourselves burning out. We find ourselves at a place of completely, oftentimes shutting down, taking those dreams that feel really hard to work for and work with and create, and stopping ourselves because our ego is leading conversation. So what I truly believe is that we got to let the ego want to play it and be like, that's cute, honey. Nice. I love that you're making it harder than it needs to be. But the essence of who I am, the realness of who I am within myself is actually what's going to move this beyond the hard days and beyond the hard conversations and beyond the fear, right? It's the being of the person, of each of us, that is the beautiful, like, wellspring, if you will, of all that is possible. If we allow her to play, man, you guys, like, that's who really, that's how we create the millions.
The revolution. Yeah, this whole conversation is revolutionary, right? If we could have more of these conversations and get ourselves in more rooms with women like you and leaders, and if you don't have one, you be that person, and then you show your team, your community, your family how to do it as well. As you said, everybody is a leader. We're all leading. Yesterday, we did an interview with a brand expert, and she said everybody has a campaign. And you're right. There's always constant messages that we're putting out. And if we have a campaign, we are a leader. What is that change we want to have in this world? So how do you start or spark a revolution being a leader? What does that take? Because that to me is very exciting energy to play in.
Yes. Well, it really actually starts with what we just shared, right? If it, in a nutshell, it's this understanding that we are more than our actions, but the actions matter only when we're really aligned with the woman that we are. When we are aligned with the woman, that what I'm talking about there is really knowing, like, what the heck do you care about? What is it that matters so deeply to you that you're willing to be the woman behind the millions? What is it that you deeply what are you deeply convicted by in such a way that allows you to put that, in those words of the other guest, put that campaign together and go forward and lead? What is it within you that has such value that if you were to die tomorrow, not to get morbid, but really you would be so proud that you did that thing, right? That's
The legacy.
that is your legacy, right? That is the thing. And it's also, it's in partnership with legacy, it's a thing that you really would truly choose to live your life for. Meaning, so for me, I build communities in the way in which I build communities and work with leaders the way in which I work with leaders, because my legacy is to show my daughters, I have 3 of them, how to live a life that's fully aligned with purpose, with value and profitability, all to create more business for good, right? Like, I want them to see a woman doing that. So that's my purpose, but here's the work I'm going to choose to do to help me make that purpose my reality, right? Or my daughter's reality. And so really, recognizing, like, let's bring these pieces together, looking at what are your core values that are going to be so aligned in to the revolution that you're wanting to create, to becoming that difference maker in the way in which you do the work, so that in which that people can feel you and know that you're different than everybody else in the industry, right? So you want to be looking at that first to start a revolution. Then if we move into what I call the 3 phases. First phase is what I call the rumble. So the rumble is really where after we've already gotten aligned into our own leadership and our own way of fully being hell yes to our own dream and our vision and where we want to take our leadership with our work, right? It's now then creating that rumble, starting to put that message out there in the world, testing your message. Sometimes the message doesn't land in the way you thought it would, right? So playing with that, allowing people to be drawn in and back into your brand. Maybe this is where you start a podcast. Maybe this is where you start putting stuff out on content out on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok even, right? We're starting to see, like, what is resonating with people in such a way that it's starting to create this rumble, right?
It's a spark in everybody that they want to now take action with you.
Right. And really at that point, our number one objective is to start growing an audience of people that are getting to understand our voice, getting to understand our values, getting to understand the vision of where we're wanting to go. And then wanting to lean in a little bit more, right? And start following your body of work, start following your message, start following your content, and start allowing you to nurture those relationships in such a way that we're now ready for the next phase, which is what I call the groundswell, right? So phase number 2 is the groundswell. So groundswell is a term that really starts when that started because of the beautiful oceans that we have around us. It really is it's a term that's often used in community organizing and in growing communities or revolutions from the ground up. But it really started from this idea that underneath, if we could imagine for a minute that there are little tremors on the planet, which we know there are obviously, but it happens under the seafloor, right? Under the ocean. So what happens is when that happens, basically the rumble from those tremors create masses of waves that then move closer into the ocean
Okay.
creating bigger waves, right? So surfers love these types of waves because they can, surf them, and then they're like, these are the famous waves that we always hear about in the surfing world. So we want to be able to create that same kind of energy, that same movement from the rumble, and then use all of the things that we've been designing our message around to then bring people forward into through the groundswell experience and want to really deepen their own transformation with each of us, with us as their leader, as their mentor, their guide into that next phase. Right. So to create a revolution, we need to create groundswell. And to do that, and some of the elements that typically are in this groundswell experience are creating partnerships, building relationships very intentionally with others who have that audience that are similar to yours. And everybody now can start moving closer to what it is, the intended, outcome for the company. Right.
Yeah.
So you start to see these with when brands start to create partnerships with other brands all the time, and they're cross promoting their audiences, and therefore we're now creating this gorgeous groundswell. Everybody's winning, everyone's growing, and then there's this experience that also happens within the community that's deepening and really getting to know your company. What happens at that point is you're creating what I call culture shift, right? Because again, we work with, to be a revolutionary, you have to have an idea that maybe is even just 5% different than everybody else's in your space, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're looking at what is that 5% difference, and we're now bringing people into that, and people are starting to like understand that messaging and really get it, and they're nodding their head and they're leaning in, they're wanting more and more and more. Mm-hmm. Then what you're creating is massive culture shift in the long term, with long-term relationships. So it's a really, really powerful thing.
That is.
Yeah. Into phase 3, which is the expanse. And that's really when you start to take over your industry. And that's also fun.
Oh my God. Every step of that, I was like, yes. Yes, we need that. We need that. But breaking it down, as you said, and using those analogies is so insightful, so helpful. But you can see, and you said those strategic partners and really being intentional with where you're spending your time, what relationships you're building. That's incredible. And all along, it sounds very similar to niche marketing, right? Diving into, who is your audience?
Yes.
But then that next step of bringing in other people who have the same audience or similar demographics that they're working with, partnering, and then total takeover, that last piece. That's incredible. And it sounds all along that you're building a community.
That's it. I mean, that's really
deep. You're solidifying and expanding your community, each one, and they're buying into your mission.
Yeah.
How important is community now, given after the pandemic, having such a virtual digital world? And it seems with each generation, right, from the millennials to Gen Z to what's the next generation? I think they call them the alpha generation.
Okay.
Technology is more and more. Right? The 2-year-olds know how to work the iPad better than the baby boomer grandparents.
Yeah.
How important is community?
Yeah. Well, I truly believe that the pandemic was like the perfect catalyst to remind us about human connection and how important it is, right?
Yes.
Whether it's because we lost loved ones and we weren't able to be there in the hospital rooms with them, or it was because we were isolated in our own homes and we felt like people that just lived 5 miles away were now 500 miles away. Or it was just because we were alone and we realized even the most introverted of us need human touch, human connection on a regular basis. We know now that connection is everything. And so while I'm one to study trends for a very long amount of time. While back in 2017, when Mark Zuckerberg and his head of communications came to me when I was living in Austin, Texas, and asked me how the heck I was growing my Austin Moms Network community as fast and as engaged as I was. It's a community that I built over there that has now over 25,000 women in it, and has partnerships. Speaking of partnerships, has partnerships with the city of Austin, with local grocery chains and nonprofits to support moms in need at any given point. And it started as a Facebook group, right? Mark Zuckerberg at that point said the next 10 to 15 years are going to be all about community. And so that's why we want to know you, Maruxa, because what the heck are you doing? How are you doing this? Tell us their secrets, kind of thing. And so we ended up doing a block party on the streets of Austin, Texas, and bring together all these incredible moms for Mother's Day and pamper them and love on them. But what I started to realize, that was obviously pre-pandemic. What I started to realize is that we literally quickened the timeline of how we needed communities to be at the forefront of every conversation. So during the pandemic itself, actually, I gave away everything I did for free for the first 3 months of the pandemic. And I was just like, who needs to know how to build community online? Because we all need this right now. And so many of the live events were closing and all that stuff. And so in that process, I found that the community really is our heartbeat as a world. It is what is bringing us together. We're innovating at another level of time, like in such a fast-paced experience right now, between seeing what's in the AI space, all the technology that grew up because of the pandemic, like TikTok was like a thing overnight because of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And start to figure out, like, how do we do this well? And it's the first time I was, at this point, I'm like building out metaverses for clients, with clients, designing these incredible, like, wild experiences. And I say all that to say, like, if we as companies are not choosing to create true intentional community for the companies that we're serving, our people are going to go elsewhere. Because we're now at a point in our culture where we're expecting a relationship with those who serve us, whether it's through physical products, through services, or whatnot. And so we have this expectation of transparency, expectation of honesty, expectation of good quality service. Or else, guess what we're going to do? We're going to review them, and we're going to let them know. And we're going to tell the world, right? So those of us who are building companies and have not yet gotten on the train of building a community, it's now. Because those who are doing that now are going to be the grandmothers and the grandfathers of community design or community creation and bringing these people together in the next 10 years. We're going to feel like we're the grandparents. Okay. And I think if we're not doing that now, we're going to really find ourselves in a place where our people are going to go find it elsewhere because we care that much about it at this time.
Yeah. That sense of belonging. Everybody just wants that sense. And it probably goes all the way back to that school or the first time on the playground and somebody didn't want to play with you. And that a little insecurity popped in there. And that sense of belonging is so important. That's amazing. Everything you were just going over. And you're right. We are just going to expect it. I know for me, if I'm calling any type of company and it's a 1-800 number and I have to go through 10 different menus to get to the person they want to talk with. And that's what we tell our clients. You have us, right? You just call us. You're getting a person on the other side of the phone. You're not going to have to get some weird recording and it's going to take you 2 hours on hold to make any movement forward with it. You just call us. And it's so important to have that connection. I'm curious at how leadership styles have changed through the years. And I don't know, for me, and it probably goes back to the stories that we spoke about in the beginning of that there's a certain kind of leader, right? And if I don't fit that mold, then I can't be a leader. Right. But that has to have changed, even just going from you're running a boardroom conference room and now you're running a Zoom call and everybody's at home and they're a lot more dressed down. It's a different dynamic, a different work environment, community environment than ever before.
Yeah, totally. I 100% believe that you're right. Those observations are incredibly correct, right? Like leadership right now is in this interesting shift because a lot of especially in more corporate settings, leadership tends to still be the boomers, generation, the Generation X. And so those generations were really, especially the boomer generation, has was raised, the baby boomers were raised in this era of hierarchy, right? And so that and being that that's what they saw, I don't even see it as a fault of their own. It's just how they're programming, going back to the conversation around programming, right? So that's what they saw. So that's what they expected. Just like I thought as an 18-year-old, like, oh, that's what a leader is. It's somebody who's a CEO of a company, or at least a manager, a branch manager for a bank, for example. But that could be a leader, I guess. Right. So, but the truth is that, again, we're expecting we as a world, as a culture in the United States, are expecting a very, very different type of service and connection with our with it to be a part of this culture and to be like a thriving member of the culture, which is not a bad thing. But because of that, it has really evolved. And now that more, the Gen X and millennials are now taking on leadership roles, they're bringing in much more of that humanness into leadership. Mm-hmm. So for those any baby boomers that are listening, please know I'm not saying that you're all one way, but as a generality, that is what we're seeing over these generations. So it makes sense, right, that we as a world are starting to evolve the way in which we're doing leadership. And think in many ways, thank goodness, because what we're starting to see is that individuals are able to shine in all of their genius and all of the essence, as we talked about earlier, and all of their beauty. It doesn't matter if you're just starting in your job, or you are a manager or a VP of a company, or, in the C-suite. It doesn't really matter. And so we are starting to see that shift. One of the things I talk a lot about is that we need to remember that we're all heartbeats in the room. We're not just numbers. Yes. So when we speak to one another, when we have deadlines, let's imagine we're right now, trying to hit a deadline, and we have to, reach these many sales calls, like let's say 50 sales calls by the end of the month. It's easy for us to forget that the people on the other side of those sales calls are human, right? And so how can we keep reminding ourselves and be present with the recognition that every single one of these beautiful beings is a heartbeat, which means they have curiosities, they have loves, they have things they really hate, actually. They have things that make them so intrigued. And at the same time, they're like super anxious about certain things in their lives as well, right? When we really see them in all of that, and we can be present to that, and the fact that we also have those same feelings within each of us, how can that change? How can that change our relationship with the beautiful humans that we get to serve? Ooh. I often say it as, I believe, whether it's, God or the divine or higher power, that we are all created from the image of something divine, something beyond. So when we look at someone's eyes that are right here in front of us, we get to be in that reverence and hold that person with a sense of dignity, as if we're looking into the eyes of a creator, of our divine creator, right? Yeah. How would that change relationships? How does that change conversation when we're building these beautiful revolutions that we're building?
Yeah, you're bringing back that heart touch to any type of relationship, sales, energetic exchange, even leadership. And you said it before, getting rid of the egos, which might force us to be a little bit more pushy than we usually are, or our insecurities are heightened, or so I love that being, what would you call it? Heart-centered, soul-centered. Adding that is more than just that human touch back to it. But I think it's a beautiful way to start to wrap up our podcast, ending on that. Remember that person who is on the other side of the phone, the Zoom call, how can you have that connection even in this virtual space? And that builds and deepens the trust, the faith of that relationship. Because if there isn't a trust in the relationship, it's not going to go very far, unfortunately. So how can you hold that space for them? And that's what all of our advisors try to do. And you said it so beautifully. It's to hold that space for our clients to not feel judged or intimidated, overwhelmed, or stressed, but to just be who they are, show up as they are. And we're just here to help and to serve. Is there anything, Musha, that we didn't cover today? I feel like we went through a lot, and I'm so excited about this episode. It's so good. Anything that you want to make sure the listeners or readers, where they can find you, what they can, any next steps? I'm like, we need to have a whole team meeting about this after listening to this.
I love it.
Make sure that we are partnering with the right people. We are expanding. We got our messaging down. But all that is so important. So taking the time, and that's what I would say to everybody who's listening, watching, carve out some time to listen to this, feel into it, see where your energy is, where your heart is. What is that impact you want to have on this world? How you can step into leadership, who you can partner with, and start expanding. Just take that time to visualize it, feel into it, but do it. Don't tell me you have too much to do today. Don't tell me you don't have time for this, because we are a creator of time. So if you make this a priority, you will get it done. Yes. So what about you, Maruxa? Where can everybody find you?
So there's really two wonderful places to find me. The first is, as I mentioned, I give a lot of my stuff away for free. So I would love for everybody here to continue to learn about what it looks like to create a revolution. We have what we call, it's a newsletter. It's and we deliver it through email. It's called the Revolutionary Insiders Club. You can find it at Revolution. Thank you. And you can find it just simply at revolutionarycommunities.com. So definitely go there, and it'll be a place to sign up. If you want to do further work or really look at like how I could be of support to you and your company, find me on LinkedIn, Maruxa Murphy. And I'm the only one. There's very few Maruxas in the world. So find me, send me a note when you're wanting to connect, and let me know that we met through this podcast. And what I'll do at that point is I'll send you my calendar, and we can have a conversation about what's next and what else is possible. Or if you want to just follow my body of work on LinkedIn, feel free to follow me there, or Instagram as well.
Oh, I'm popping on your calendar. I know we talked about before we even got on, started recording, connecting. You seem to have so many strategic partners and companies, businesses that you worked with, and just get in her worlds, ladies, because if anything, you're going to become a leader. You're going to start a revolution, and nobody is ever too small, too old, too late in the game to become a leader or start a revolution. And I love that we are filming this on International Women's Day. What a perfect time to start embracing equity, shattering the glass ceiling, and know that you already are a leader, right? You already are making an impact in this world. So thank you so much, Maruxa, for being on here with us and spending some time. And thank you to our listeners for listening to another episode of Women Behind the Millions. We'll see you on our next one.